Hi and welcome to another gear review. My name is Matthias and today we are going to be looking at two new lenses that I might be adding to my filmmaking kit. So a good friend of mine and very talented underwater filmmaker has recently decided that he wants to sell some of his equipment. So he's contacted me and asked me if I would be interested in getting some of his used lenses. Now the lenses that we talk about is the Canon 100 f2.8 L series macro lens, which is a really nice lens, and the second one that he wants to sell is the Tokina ATX 10-17 fisheye lens f3.5 to 4.5. Now he's given me those two lenses for a couple days to test them and see whether or not I like them on my GH5. Now since it's such a beautiful day today, I have decided to take that chance and come out here to my backyard and shoot with those two lenses to get a little bit of a feel for what they're capable of. So the whole purpose of this video today is to see how those two different lenses work on the GH5 and what kind of material, what kind of footage I'm able to capture with them. Both of these lenses have an EF mount, so to be able to use them on my GH5 I'll be using a Metabone speed booster, and it's going to be the XL version of it. And now let's not waste any more time and we'll start with the Canon 100 macro lens. Let's go and see what it can do. Alright, so that was already very promising. Now let's get into the Tokina 10-17. So I'm back in the office after having spent some time this afternoon out and about testing those two lenses, and you've already seen some of the sample footage that I have collected with either of those two lenses on my GH5. Now what needs to be said is that the footage that you've seen has been played back at real time, so there was no slow motion integrated in there to make the footage look any smoother than it was recorded. I did also not put any stabilization onto that footage, so what you've seen before is exactly as it came out of the camera when we talk about smoothness. Now let's talk about the Canon 100mm macro lens first, which worked really nicely with the Metabones speed booster on the GH5. The Canon lens produces some really nice background blur, and there is literally no vignetting visible anywhere in the corners. Now the lens itself already is a pretty fast lens, being a f2.8 aperture lens. Using it with the Metabones speed booster though makes it even faster and very suitable for low light shooting as well. The one-tap autofocus worked quite well, even though the lens sometimes had problems focusing on objects that were in the foreground. It would tend to try to focus on whatever was in the background. So in these instances I had to switch over to manual focus and then manually focus on the smaller object that was in the foreground. This wasn't really an issue for me though, because the GH5 has some fantastic focusing assist systems like the peaking that make it really easy to set the focus spot on to where you want in your framing. Now this Canon lens is actually stabilized itself, so I was expecting it to be quite well on the GH5, which has an in-body stabilization also. And even though the GH5 was showing me that the in-lens stabilization wasn't working properly for whatever reason, I still think that the footage handheld, which all of the footage that I've taken this afternoon has been taken handheld, it looks quite fluid most of the time and most of the shots are usable. Now if you want to make them even smoother, make sure that you do some slow motion, you slow them down a little bit and use some post-production stabilization software, whether you're using Final Cut or Premiere Pro, and then the footage will be flawless. You can easily use that on any project. After only having spent a small amount of time with the Canon lens, I have already made up my mind that I am going to purchase this lens from my friend. I think it's a fantastic lens to capture B-roll, and I also think that I can see this lens being used in some event videography where you're trying to get some nice portrait shots of the people attending the event, but you don't really want to be putting the camera into their face. So with that one you can keep your distance a little bit and still be able to get some nice and close-up shots of them, including the nice and blurry background that this lens is giving you. Now moving on to the Tokina lens, and I have to say that this one worked pretty well on the GH5 as well, again using the Metabones speed booster to be able to attach the EF mount onto the Micro Four Thirds system that is on the GH5. Now obviously it's really hard to compare those two lenses together because the Canon lens is a macro lens and the Tokina is a wide-angle fisheye lens, and this is very visible if you look at some footage at the 10mm focal range. You will see that you're getting those typical bends in your image on the sides. If you're looking at trees or houses or anything, you will see that they will get some bends on the sides, which is just a typical fisheye lens look. If this is something that you're going for, and this lens is quite good, I personally don't really like that look, so that really put me off this lens right from the beginning. Now I don't really understand why this lens has a focal variation of 10 to 17mm. I think it would have been a lot more useful if it was 7 to maybe 17 or 8 to 17, something like that, or a 10 to maybe 35, something like that. In this range it would have been a lot more useful. This way 10 to 17 in my opinion is a little bit limiting when we're talking about areas where you can use this lens. Now there is a few positive things about this lens too. There is no vignetting on the corners visible anywhere in the footage. The autofocus, the one-tap autofocus works pretty well, and because it is a wide-angle lens, most of the time everything in your frame will be in focus. Now the Tokina lens itself does not have an in-lens stabilization, and in my opinion you can see that on the footage, in particular when I'm walking with the lens. You can see a distinctive shake on the footage. And I'm pretty sure you can get rid of that in post-production using a stabilizer, or even just slowing the footage down to maybe 50%, and you should get a lot smoother shots that way. So it's not really dramatic, but it was visible. Now, where can I see this lens being used? As I said before, for me personally, I don't think I'll use this lens. I don't think I will buy this lens from my friend, because I just don't really see a suitable use for me personally. I can see this lens though being used for vlogging style videos where you're holding the camera out in front of you, because it gives you a fairly wide field of view. At first I thought I could see this lens also in real estate, but then after taking a shot or two back at my place with the camera, you could just see that the bends on the side, because it is a fisheye lens, are very, very distinct, and I personally would not use it for any real estate because it just doesn't look nice in my opinion. So, summing up my experience from this afternoon using those two lenses, as I mentioned before, I'm definitely going to get the Canon 100mm. That's a fantastic lens that I can very well use in my filmmaking kit. I won't get the Tokina 10-17. I don't really think that's a very useful lens for me, in particular because I've actually got the 12-60 Panasonic lens for my GH5 that I'm actually filming on right now, and that does cover pretty much the range of the 10-17 already, without the, in my opinion, ugly bends of the fisheye lenses on the sides. And there you have it, guys. That was our video for today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this video was helpful for you. I hope you got something out of this video and my little test from this afternoon. If you did, please do hit that like button. It means a lot to me, and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't yet, for more travel and gear related content in the future. Again, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.